This is the Seers See Podcast, where we explore the seer gift within the Kingdom of God mindset.
Hello, Emily.
Hey, Doug.
We've been, of course, chatting for a few minutes about various things that we won't talk about on the podcast, like end time speculation and all that. It's just
none your business.
Yeah, and various things. But anyway, I wanted to talk today about, first of all, how you been?
I'm good.
It's been like a month since we've recorded.
I know.
Yeah. And we were going to do it last week, and then something came up at the last minute. A couple things came up last minute, and we couldn't. But the day before, you were like, what are we doing on? I said, it's, whatever the chapter is, but it's Seers and Power. Mm-hmm. And I said, I can't wait to see what I wrote, because I had forgotten. And
I had to go back through.
Yeah, I had, and Seers and Power. So it's interesting. Our last recording was about Brueggemann, honoring him, and there's a lot more Brueggemann again, applying some of his thinking. So what are your thoughts about this? Seers and Power, Seers and government. So the premise is like, okay, so seers are around. Some of you watching or listening are seers, and you go about your daily job. I mean, do you have influence at work? Do you have influence at your local government? Do you sit on the school board? Are you friends with the mayor? Are you friends with the alderman or something? And are you friends with the president or a congressman? I mean, is it appropriate? How do we use, or should we use, is there any biblical example? I mean, there's always psychics that seem to be advising, like the police,
right?
And
medium. What's there's all kinds of TV shows about it, and it's kind of glamorized that you can help find a missing kid, or you can find a dead body, or and so I'd actually, man, I should have looked it up. I read somewhere that there's actually a group of Christians that are working with law enforcement and asking for revelation, and God's been giving it to them. I haven't checked it out. I don't know what their philosophies are, but man, if that's going on, how awesome is that? I mean, I think it's a win for the team. I mean,
I'm good with it. I don't know about, so we can talk about a couple things, that whole idea, but glamorizing it, do we want to call attention to it because it's, maybe we do. I don't know. It seems weird, and I don't know, because what do you think?
Well, seers tend to operate in a very prophetic role, and prophets in the Old Testament, and you talk about this some, tend to be with the monarchs. They tend to be with the ruling classes. They are the advisors to the kings, for better or worse. Mm-hmm. And there's good prophets, there's bad prophets that are up there, and you specifically point out two seers. We know that Daniel and Joseph both were seers. Mm-hmm. And so, and if you line up their stories, they're pretty close. Got two guys taken out of Israel, the land of Israel, taken to a foreign country. They rise up through the ranks from the bottom rungs to becoming crazy influential in these pagan kingdoms, which, by the way, that same pattern you will find in the book of Esther too. So it's a very common story in the Bible that you would have this. And so it kind of made me wonder about Esther, is there anything to indicate that she had a scene, a thing? I don't see that off the top of my head. I don't get there, but she definitely had a prophetic role because she's speaking truth, and she's speaking truth to this person in a great deal of power. So, but
I mean, a great deal of power. She prevented genocide,
right?
I mean, legit. There are some people, some preterists, I'll just say, who see the fulfillment of the Ezekiel 36 war or whatever, the big war in Ezekiel. They see the fulfillment of that in the events of the book of Esther, because you have the government saying it's okay to kill all the Jews and take their stuff, and he won't he can't undo that, but he can't. But then based on Esther's influence, he issues another decree saying the Jews can fight and protect their stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and if they can actually take your stuff too, and so that's just it, and we don't have much of a record, but that had to be violence. That had to be tons of violence all across the empire, all across
Yeah.
the land. I mean, had to be very bloody. So I don't know that I buy the preterist argument, but some people make a very strong argument that was fulfilled right in that event, which could have been, by the way, the destruction of Israel, the destruction of the Jews. That's it. They're done.
Right. Right. Now,
They're
and
all
I think
killed.
for whatever reason, okay, when you're talking, this is like only like barely connected at all. But when you said that, something clicked in place when you talked about, how you made the decree and he couldn't undo it. There was this belief, like with Zeus, once he made a decree, he couldn't undo it. And how many times in the Bible are we told that God repents, that he literally changes his mind? That one of the things that makes him truly sovereign is he has the ability to change his mind.
He
How
is
cool is
free to
that?
act. He is free. Yeah, he changes his mind, like with it literally says with in Jonah,
hmm
but he changed his
Jonah,
mind.
before the flood, with Moses, with Samuel, when he appoints Saul, it's
I've said it
it,
before, but when Mary goes to Jesus at the wedding, and Jesus, who only said what he heard the Father saying, said, "This is not my time," and she said, "Yeah,
right?
it is." Okay,
Yes.
God's like, "All right, we're moving up the timetable,"
Mhm.
and he. I think that's really interesting. Yeah, I talk about that in this chapter, that God is free, and
Mhm.
because He's free, we can pursue justice and compassion.
It's
Without a free God, you can't. You have a tyrant, and you can't. You're not free to like challenge systems. You're not free to challenge tyrannical structures.
Yeah. And man,
I
that tyrannical structure, it's never a good thing in the Bible. It doesn't matter who's supporting it, who's
Mhm.
trying. I mean, because even when Solomon does it with the building of the temple, his purpose is good. He wants to accomplish something for God, but he ends up being contrasted and compared with Pharaoh, and not
Yeah,
he doesn't come out looking good. I mean, not in one little bit. And I think we need to remember that that tyrannical structure. So maybe that's where the idea of seers coming in and helping and being influences in these governmental systems is that might be part of why we need to be there. Um, or we may actually be very detrimental, because I thought you asked it a very interesting question. How do we keep the Rasputins out? That's not how you said it, but
hmm
how do we keep? And so, and you might want to let people know who Rasputin is, because I know a lot of people have no idea.
yeah. It's funny because just yesterday, my youngest daughter Zoe was watching the cartoon version Anastasia. And I walk through. Oh, you're watching Anastasia? She said, "Oh yeah, Rasputin." Blah blah blah. I'm like, and my wife was watching it. She'd never seen it. And she said, "Was Rasputin real?" I said, "Yeah, but not quite like how he is portrayed in the movie." Rasputin was an advisor. He was a religious, like monk, a mystic advisor to the last Tsar and Tsarina of Russia. And
Romanov.
the Romanovs, yeah, and their son was a hemophiliac, and they could not stop him from bleeding. But somehow Rasputin could use his powers he was the only person who could treat the son successfully. And so that made him in good standing with the Tsarina, even though he was sleeping with half the court. And
Right?
it was scandalous. And, but he would advise them, and drawing on his, I'm going to say mystical powers. I don't know, spiritual powers, whatever. I mean, was he was he a prophet of God? Was he a prophet of some other power? Who knows? But his last prophecy was, I mean, his rampant sexual appetite and his alcoholism suggests that he was not in the kingdom of God.
Right.
But again, there are people who are Christians who, they struggle in some areas. So I don't
On
know,
the
but
flip side, the Pharaoh's magicians were able to replicate up to the third plague, and it
yeah.
wasn't until the sixth plague that they could not stand before the plagues. So, yeah, okay.
It's hard to know. I mean, not a great guy, but his last prophecy, I think he ended up being killed by members of the court right before. But his last
Oh, yeah.
prophecy was, if Russia got involved in World War I, then that would be the end of the czars, and something worse would come. Well, that was true. I mean, but
Yeah.
so that's Rasputin. But was he a seer? I think he was a seer. I think he was certainly prophetic. I don't know if he was literally a seer, but I got the idea in my research, and I forgot to look deeper now. But it's not unusual for there to be very prophetic. And when I say prophetic, they could be false prophets. They could be tying in to false powers, the dark powers. But that's what makes them false, not
Right.
their accuracy.
Yeah.
Okay, and so we had theosophists. We had powerful. We'd almost call them wizards, who were involved in the U.S. government, in FDR's government. I mean, there were lots of these very mystical, theosophists who were, in the 19th century. We talk about it in the history chapter, but this little bit of it here was very. I mean, there were lots of mysticism going on in America, and some of these people were in government. Some of them led incredible reforms. Some of them introduced hybrid technology into agriculture, which is interesting. I just saying it, just putting it out there, not casting judgment one way or the other. But it is interesting that it was a theosophist who introduced hybrids into American agriculture. That was I can't remember his name. I have a book around here somewhere, but I have it on the screen. But I mean, so we have in the West, and of course Russia maybe isn't considered West, but we have powerful mystical people influencing powerful governments.
Yeah. But what's interesting to me about, like, going back to Rasputin, he charmed the Russian Orthodox priests and elites in the church before he made the connections with the socialites and the upper echelons of society, which allowed him access to the Tsar and Tsarina. So the fact that the gatekeeping wasn't done in the church, and if that had been done properly, he never would have gotten that far, or he would have
Right.
had to at least found a different route. So the church could have actually stood against him. But by being the ones that introduced him, they lost all credibility to say, hey, we don't want anything to do with this. And so this is the reason why I think we've got to go back, and I'm always harping on it. We've got to be teaching people Bible. We've got to be teaching people Scripture, and we need to have spiritual people plugged into the systems, because if we don't, that leaves a vacuum for people like Rasputin to walk into.
That's interesting. There's an advisor to President Trump, a real spiritual advisor, and she gets a ton of criticism. I don't know anything really about her, but that's the challenge too. Or let's just say that the criticism is good. I mean, how does someone who's a celebrity religious leader, get that much influence over the president, over any president? Or let's say the criticism is unfounded and she's solid and
Right.
basically prophetic. How do we like cover that person in prayer and that she's hearing correctly and advising well?
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's just a president, and like most of us won't have access to the president. What about your mayor? Like, what about your school board? I mean, what about your CEO if you're in a corporate environment? I mean, I remember I used to work for a company, and I had several layers of administration between me and the owner, who was also the CEO. But at once, I just felt really led to give him a word of encouragement. And I was walking past his office. I stepped in and said, hey, and I gave him a prophetic word. It was the Lord. I gave him a prophetic word. And and I said, this is going to be a little bit challenging, maybe coming from me, but and blah, blah, gave it to him. And I left. And it was encouraging. It was super powerful and encouraging to him. I found out later, it really did influence him. And it was good. I mean, that was from the Lord, right? It was a word of encouragement. Another time with him, I'll just tell a funny story. I'm not a seer, but I can be prophetic, right? So if I had seen something around him, then you can. But the Lord said he needs this encouraging word, and as a leader, it's prophetic people give direction and course corrections.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a time where he was considering a sizable donation to a ministry from the business, and what they needed to fill this is during COVID, so all this money had dried up, donations to ministries, and so he was trying to shoot the gap so this ministry could keep going. And when he found out, and I was the liaison to it, and when he found out that the amount needed was way more than he expected, I remember he was messaging me, and he was in a meeting upstairs. I heard him come down the stairs. I messaged him back the dollar amount, and I heard him come down the stairs, and he motioned me. He's way younger than I am, dynamic guy. Doug. And then we ran into his office, and I actually had my planner. It was a certain kind of planner that has these little quotes, each day on it, and I'm kind of looking to see if I could find the one. I'm assuming each planner is the same with all the quotes, the motivational quotes. But I had my planner to take notes because I was curious what the direction would be. And he said, that scares me. And I said, oh, and I pointed, the quote on my planner for that day was, do something that scares you. And his name was Alex. I said, Alex. I just showed it to him. He looked at it. I said, all right, we're doing it. And I said, but then the Lord spoke to me. So what it was a fundraiser for a Christian radio station, and the dollar amount was sizable. But what he was prepared to give was about half. Okay, and I said, you know what? I have an idea, and this is the Lord. I said, we'll call them. We'll call the fund. The fund. It was a fund drive, and they only had like 30 minutes left. I said, we'll call them. We'll say we'll do a matching gift up to hitting your goal. And he said, yeah. He said, basically, we'll do it until the end of the fundraising, and then whatever's left, we'll just meet it. I said, okay. And so I called the station manager, and I'm not saying the amounts because people can figure out what company this is because it was anonymous, but
I remember this.
Yeah. So it was cool. So they're like, oh, so then on the radio, they're like, we have an anonymous donor, a business leader in the community, and they want to do a matching gift until we can hit our goal. Listen, and they said the phones lit up, right? And then up to the top of the hour, and they said, we're going to continue this for another hour. They continued for another hour. And basically they called me back and said, we hit our goal. I said, okay, what do we owe you? He said, it was the dollar amount that the owner had prepared to write. And yeah. And I'm like, that is so God, all of it. Right. But it was just, I was in the moment, and I challenged him, and he came back and said, okay, we'll do it. I'll surrender, write the whole check. I said, no, maybe we can share the blessing and the giving. That was the Lord. And, and so then multiple people were blessed, right?
But this goes back to something we were talking about before, and how sometimes there's the obedience and then the understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And sometimes we need to just be willing to, may not understand, we may not get all of it. I remember the first time.
Let's explain, because we were not recording, but we were talking about sometimes the Lord, like, we don't understand what's going on, but we're just called to be obedient, and then the understanding comes later. And so the example is in Luke 17 when 10 lepers come to Jesus and they said, will you heal us? And he said, well, just go show yourself to the priests, because that's what required for them. The priests would analyze them. If they were clean, they could rejoin society. And they were not clean when they left Jesus, but they were cleaned on the way. So they didn't understand, but they said, okay, we're just going to go and be obedient. And then they got cleaned. And then one of them came back and thanked the Lord. But so we've talked about that a lot. Like, I don't understand. I'm just going to do one step at a time and be obedient. And then maybe the understanding will come. And that's actually a great example of the whole story, where he didn't understand. I didn't understand, but occasionally get a prophetic word and we just kind of go from there.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of times I found that when God is getting ready to do something massive, it's just like, will you put your foot right there, and put the next foot right here. Mm-hmm. And it's like, but why? This makes no sense to me. And you can't do that. I mean, if you do it while you're okay, I'm moving, but why? Because I really do think God he's big enough to deal with our questions. I think too many of us are scared to question God. Don't question God.
Oh, you can question God. Yeah. Yeah. Even when Moses when they got to the Red Sea, and he's like, now what? I guess I should pray. And God's like, don't pray, just go. Just part the sea and go. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, put your arms up. or whatever. I can't remember how it words it.
Yeah, stretch out your staff. Yeah.
Yeah. Or Peter, go ahead, take a step out of the boat. And he's like, all right, and then in that case, when his understanding came up, he took, he sank.
I was thinking of Elijah and Elisha this week too, and the audacity that Elisha had to say, "Hey, I want double what you have." I
Yeah.
mean, we've been taught not to ask for things, not to question things, not to. We're talking to the creator of the universe. We're talking to the God who literally laid down his life, stepped off his throne in heaven to come and be among us. And you think that he doesn't want to give us good things?
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's hard for me to wrap my mind around sometimes. Now, I will believe it all day long for you and anybody who's listening. Now, for me, that's where we're going to struggle some. But we need to be in that constant dialogue. And you know what? I love it. One of my absolute favorite things is when my husband comes to me and says, "Hey, babe, can you make steaks and baked potatoes for dinner tonight?" Now I know exactly how to bless him.
Mm-hmm.
I know exactly what he wants, and I can do it, and he's going to anticipate getting it. Is God really that much different?
Is that the verse? What's the verse that where he says, you have not because you ask not,
Ask not,
or like
don't ask for
there's all this stuff that I will give you, but you haven't even asked, and sometimes we're like, oh Lord, bless me, like, be vague, but he's like, how? Be
Yeah,
really
but
specific.
if we get specific, then we get expectations, and our expectations can be dashed. And if our expectations are dashed, then God might not be who we thought he was. And then it becomes this whole cycle, and we don't like going there. But the thing is, it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like exercising, like when you're hurting those muscles in your body.
Mm-hmm.
Once you come back and start to recover, that's when you get stronger. You aren't getting
Mm-hmm.
stronger doing the exercises. It's in the recovery that you gain the strength.
That's
And so
good.
you got to stretch that faith out. And you're talking about fake it till you make it. The other one, faith it till you make it.
Yeah.
And that's it. There's been times in my life I know I've gone, I don't get this at all. I don't want to do this. I don't understand this. But God is being so crystal clear right now. And 90% of my life, that's really what I want. I want God to be so crystal clear that I'm just like, this isn't even a discussion. Excuse the dogs. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's not a discussion. It's not a debate. I just need to move.
Mm-hmm.
That's when life is easy. And so when he does talk and he does speak up that clear, is the first instinct to go, yeah, I can't go there. That doesn't make sense. So I can't do it.
Yeah.
We are so conflicted as human beings. It's really ridiculous. And I think that's the reason why we've got to really work on being focused and that single-minded man, not the double-minded man that James warns about. So
Oh, that's good
anyhow.
too. I think it's interesting, the Old Testament seers that you mentioned earlier, Daniel and Joseph, who are mentioned in the book. They were part of the two great evil empires. The third
Right?
great evil empire is Assyria.
Mhm.
But
Well,
I mean, but they were just part of it. I mean, they were part of the example of pagan.
yeah, Egypt and Babylon.
And
And
they didn't, Joseph and his obedience, really by listening to God and interpreting the dreams, he ended up bringing all the power under Pharaoh. And I remember writing this because I'm very critical of, like, I find it very offensive what Joseph did. Like, he
yeah,
basically enslaved the nation of Egypt to Pharaoh. And so, like, how could that be God's will? But then you can see it was part of God's will because they became the example of slavery to the powers.
hmm
And then
hmm
that's who God has to level to free people. I mean, this is a multi-century plan that God is
yeah,
enacting.
400 centuries or so. I mean,
400 years, yeah. I mean, it's a
I got 400
long,
centuries.
and so, like, we can be like, well, Joseph, how could he do that? What he do was ethical. Like, I think he did what God wanted him to do
Okay,
because
so
God had a plan. You know what I
I
mean?
think you need to go back and explain what he did, because I have found, because we taught on this on Faith and Other Oddities, people do not even realize this happens. And
Yeah.
if you want to know where to find it in the Bible, that is Genesis 47. I wrote this down because I knew it 13 through 26. basically when the famines hit, he said, okay, we're going to take, I think it's your livestock first. We're going to take your cattle
Well,
first, and then we're going to,
let's back up first even further. I mean, so Joseph, I'm seeing this meta narrative now. He was a slave. He was betrayed into slavery. Somehow finds himself interpreting Pharaoh's dream accurately. So, and then Pharaoh puts him in charge of
while he's in
accumulating.
prison, by the way.
Yeah, while he's in prison. Yeah. So then Pharaoh said, "All right, you know what? You're gonna be my prime minister. You need to be in charge of storing up food for the 7 years of plenty. So for the 7 years of famine, we'll have stuff." So they do that for the 7 years of plenty, and then the 7 years of famine come, and I started to imagine. So as people ran out of food, they would come to Pharaoh, who'd been saving up. Interesting how they didn't teach anyone else to save up. It was just Pharaoh who saved.
Ooh, that's a good
Like there's
point.
no Dave Ramsey seminars. It was all about,
Right?
it was, hey, you need to. Now, granted, I think only a government might be able to save up for
Like
7
that,
years.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be hard for. I
Especially
think
when you see like the houses on the digs, a lot of the houses, I mean, they're itty bitty, like 8 by 10 rooms, and that's where a whole family would live. So where would they store it?
we're expected to have 3 days of water and food on hand for a disaster, and most people don't, right? So it's hard to
Right.
plan ahead. When a hurricane comes, maybe you get enough for a week or something. So, okay, that's fair. The government is the only one who has the power really and the resources to save up for 7 years. But as people ran out of food and they would go to buy from the government, they had to trade their livestock first. All right, yeah, you can have food, but you're signing over the livestock. Now, maybe you can take care of them, but they're mine. And they're like,
Right.
okay, fine, I need to eat, and then what else? I mean, eventually it got to the point where Pharaoh said, give me your land and then I'll give
Yeah.
you food to eat. So now you're not a squatter, but you're paying rent, or you're basically, it's my land.
Like
I'm letting you
serf.
live on it. Yeah, you're a serf.
Kind of
Yeah.
like a serf. Yeah.
And so by the end of it, except for the priests, who they were maintained separate, he didn't require that of the priests. And these are Pharaoh's priests. These are, these are not God's priests. But basically, by the end of the famine, Pharaoh owned everything, all the livestock, all the crops, all the land. He
And
was
even
the
the
sole
people.
owner. And yeah,
Even the people, they willingly said they put themselves in bondage to Pharaoh. And if that system had not been put into place, then he would not have been able to enslave the Israelites. And so, yeah, this is a huge issue. And yeah, God actually, he used it. Now, was that what God wanted to happen?
I don't. I mean, it's the creation epic. It's the narrative that defines Israel's history and
Right?
what happens on the cross. I mean, so I almost wonder. It's almost like I could see the gods of Egypt. The gods behind the imperial government of Egypt saying, you know what? Yes, okay. The years of plenty, and what we can do is we can impress everybody through our Pharaoh. And then we can
Absolutely.
enslave these humans, and they'll be less than human. They won't be the image of God. They'll be just serfs, and we can convey our religion to them, that they are worthless. And I mean, I can kind of see that the powers are like, that's so strange that Yahweh would allow, the Most High God would allow 7 years of famine, and now we can enslave everybody. But we're going to do it. We're, checkmate, God. And now we're going to take your people and we're going to enslave them, or we're going to kill all the boys. And then they're all, this prophecy that, supposedly happened in the Garden of Eden about, that's all going to be gone, Yahweh. But it's like what Michael Heiser used to say about, take your best shot. It's what God's opinion, in the cosmic world. Take your best shot. I've checkmated you. I've already figured every move out. And so,
Right.
maybe it wasn't God's will 100%, or maybe it was. But if it wasn't, or if it was, God used it
Right.
to give us the great redemption arc.
Yeah, I think that's the beautiful message of the Bible. It doesn't matter how big, bad, and ugly things get, God is able to redeem. And I think that's where the real hope lies. Not that he's like controlling all the pieces on both sides of the chessboard, but that he is allowing, we can all participate in what's going on, and there's no chance that we're going to mess it up. And the other thing I was thinking about this morning is, Joseph has kind of always been a little dubious of a character. He is a seer, and one of the things that happens with seer is, and this could be Rasputin's story too. But I've seen it over and over again where they get puffed up, they get
Mm-hmm.
arrogant, they think, "Oh well, I see, I know, I'm wiser, I'm smarter." Uh, Whenever the back and forth with the bags of grain,
Mm-hmm.
he basically says, "Don't you know I'm a diviner? Don't you know I'm a nakash?" That word there is the same as for the serpent in the garden,
He says that
and
to his brothers that he's tricked, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and there's always some debate. Did he mean this, or is this part of the ploy that he's working with them? Because there's this whole deception that goes on.
Well,
But then
he's
when he's
completely immersed in pagan religion and Egyptian religion. I mean, he's the head of the religion, isn't he? I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
remember, but
well,
his wife is a priestess, or at least the daughter of a priest,
mhm, mhm,
and
yeah,
uh,
uh,
like it's not like there's the law of Moses or anything to provide some operating some.
right.
So I think what Joseph may be a tool of the Lord to establish the system of oppression,
It could
which
very well could be because there's some hubris in him. Because when
hmm
he sends his brothers back, I mean, obviously with the dreams, you see some hubris right there. With you're going to bow down and worship me. He's kind of a brat,
I thought he was
and then
immature there. Yeah, it
yeah,
was like,
but then when he says sent the brothers back to his father, he goes, "Tell our father that I've been made lord over all of Egypt." And that I looked it up, and the word there is Adonai. I mean, it's just he's this is who I am, and so he's kind of problematic. And then uh, his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, I believe it's Manasseh, is he doesn't want to remember anymore. He doesn't want to remember what it was before being in Egypt,
hmm,
and so he's problematic on multiple levels because he's not the clear cut hero that I think we want our Bible characters to be. But again, that goes back to what I keep going back to. There's no one good in the Bible except for God and Jesus.
yeah,
Everyone else is a big mess.
yeah. I'm scrolling
So,
through Ephraim and Manasseh. I'm scrolling through Genesis 48, and it's I do have yes, and yet he was obedient, right? It's like he's not criticized. No one criticizes him in Scripture. You can look at the fruit of what happened,
mhm. I,
and
I think
yeah,
he got out there and he was alone, and I think he didn't have
hmm,
anyone to hold him accountable. This is speculation, but just based on what I've seen with other people, so often seers feel rejected by their family. They feel rejected by the community of faith. Um, my makeshift light filter just fell, and it was like rays coming down from heaven. Um, so, but they they get too caught up in their own abilities.
yeah,
And so I can totally see that happening, especially where there's all this pressure where he does have a useful gift. And
hmm,
people go, "Oh, look how important you are. Look how special you are," and kind of petting on him and, hitting the ego a little bit. I mean,
hmm.
puffing it up. So I, I
And yet he
I'm
definitely did not cross certain lines. He's the example, right? He definitely didn't cross certain lines, and he
right.
honored his supervisors, and or his bosses or his owners, whatever. Yeah, interesting guy. I just it is interesting.
He's complex. He's
Yeah, I mean,
def-
even the whole plot to try to figure out if the brothers were being honest.
yeah, yeah.
He's running a yeah.
Judah winds up being the hero there, but man, Judah has to get kicked in the teeth to become that hero, and does some terrible things on his way. So, but so, but I mean, you bring up an interesting point. Should where how do seers plug in? Because if we're propping up an evil system or we're participating in it, are we tacitly kind of endorsing it by playing a part in it, or are
Well, you're
we?
under authority. So I make a point to say in this chapter, like I am personally dubious of political authority. All right, I just this is not a political podcast. This is a biblical
You and
podcast.
me both.
Yeah. And the fact is, God has appointed governments. And I think our role as Christians is to steward well what we have been given influence over. And like in a multi-billion-dollar company, my job was to help the company become more profitable, make more money, and in an ethical way. My job was
Right.
not to try to trick the CEO into funding ministries,
Right.
or whatever pet project I thought God would. Well, God really want this. Well, maybe, but that's the you know what I mean. So my God wasn't trying to manipulate for what I thought was the kingdom. My job was to do what I was hired to do, and in as godly way as possible.
Right. Well, and that's actually how Joseph and Daniel rose through the ranks. That's what got them to that point. That's what got Esther to the point she was. That's what got probably Nehemiah and Ezra to those points, because there are other Israelites in exile who wind up in places of influence with people of power. And so this is a pretty consistent theme through
They're
the Old
stewarding
Testament.
well what they've been given, I think, and without trying to manipulate. Now, there's no, I see, what do you do if you're, advising, the Roman emperor? Well, here's just an example of, it's not a Christian example, but during the Mongols, so the Mongol Empire, the Khan, Genghis Khan, what they would do is they would go to an area and they would just kill everybody, like literally everybody. They had a whole technique of how an army of 1,000 could kill 100,000 civilians within an hour. I mean, they did that. And there was a time where, and they just swept across Asia, and they warred constantly with China, and they would take over vast parts of China and just kill all these poor Chinese people. But there was one area where there were 1 million people in this land that they conquered. And the Khan said, but they didn't kill everybody. Like they had, like, he had the Chinese advisors, right? So yes, you took over China, you killed a bunch of people, you did unspeakable things to a lot of the women, and then but you picked out the smartest and brightest as your advisors, and their job wasn't to subvert the will of the Khan. If you did, he would kill you. It was to advise him well. Anyway, so he had this one area. There's like 1 million farmers in this area, and he said, kill them all because I need the land for my horses. And this Chinese advisor said, well, actually, Your Majesty, they could provide food for your horses and your army and pay taxes if you just let them live and continue farming. And the Khan's like, that's a good idea. Let them live. And he moved on. And I'm thinking, man, who was that guy? Like, I'm like, that happened almost as fast. I mean, I wasn't there. I didn't read the first-hand account. But I mean, that Chinese advisor, or those advisors who said, Your Majesty, it's like kind of like Esther. It's like, please don't kill me. I have something I want to run by you. And I mean, he saved 1 million people.
Right.
Or,
Just
however many
wisdom.
it was. But yes, wisdom. And so, like, you work your way, you're stewarding well what you've been given, and then at the right time, you speak God's will. And that Chinese guy probably wasn't a Christian. There were actually Christians who did rise up and become advisors, not to Genghis, but to some of the other Khans. And one of them, like one of the wives of one of the Khans got converted, and the Khan almost got converted. I mean, this is how quickly things could change. And you just, like, my heart aches when I read that story. Like, man, what would have happened if he would have converted?
Changed everything. And so when you said that, it actually reminded me, because I haven't heard that specific story. I need to check that out, because I've been fascinated by the Mongols. That was just one of the things that, as a kid, totally fascinated me. Mom objected. Dad goes, she's reading a history book, leave her alone. And so, like, I forget what percentage of the Asian population can trace their ancestry back to Genghis Khan. I mean, it's a
shocking high percentage because they rape so many people.
Ridiculous.
Yeah,
ridiculous.
It is.
Yeah.
It's so where I'm getting this is from Dan Carlin, his podcast series called The Wrath of the Khans, and then he has first and second hand sources, and you can let's look up his podcast series. It's the most riveting, one of the most riveting. First of all, he's a great storyteller. But one of the most riveting series, The Wrath
Something
of
new
the
to
Cons. Yeah.
something new to listen to while I clean my bathroom. But no, but that story actually reminded me in Acts where Paul's in front of Agrippa,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, "Do you think you can make me a Christian so quickly?" But I'm almost persuaded. It's right there
So
because even
close. Yeah.
yeah, because there's no example, and you point this out in the book. There's no example of a Christian in the same position as we see the Old Testament prophets, and you list some really good reasons there. But when Paul is before ruling authority, his responses, and even Jesus talking to Pilate, it's not, he's not being sarcastic. He's not resorting to violence. It's always these very measured responses.
Mm-hmm.
And that has become part of our legacy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're supposed to be emulating. And I think so often we're being tempted to resort to violence, resort to hate, resort to, whatever it is to make that statement and resist, fight the power kind of thing. That wasn't what we were called to do.
Mm-hmm.
We're the yeast. We're supposed to.
That's what the Jesuits try to do. I know a lot of people listening will be like, Jesuits, how dare you reference them? But what they try to do is become people who were influenced, who were like whispering in the ears of leaders of pagan countries, and they would try to go out and be not, the Catholic missionaries. When they came to North America, were not really interested in changing how the Native Americans lived. They just wanted to expose them to the gospel. It was the Protestants who came who wanted to lock them
Yeah.
up and stuff. So there's this really interesting. But I mean, that goes back centuries where the Catholics would send out these Jesuits and other and missionaries from other orders also, and they would try to integrate into whatever culture and then be the salt and be the light there, and let the culture change from within as the bread and the it's not just them. I mean, I think maybe the Orthodox too, but it's just a different mentality than going in with a Bible and a
Bible and a
soapbox.
sword.
Yeah, right. Or Bible and a sword, and say with. So I think
Yeah.
it's we have 1900 years of checkered history where Christians are trying to figure out the right ways. Or do we use the faith to justify what we want to do, or but that's why I look to the scriptures, like the examples we have. They weren't trying to topple the governments and establish Yahweh worship in Babylon or in Egypt. They were trying to be faithful to their God and to the person they were serving.
And you've got to think about how conflicted that had to be on some levels, because when Paul and Jesus are there, I mean, Caesar is worshipped as a god. And, Luke, when he writes his gospel, he's adopting all the language that's applied to Augustus. And he's saying, this is titles that belong to our Jesus. They don't belong to a
And,
Roman Caesar.
and Peter
And,
even says, pray for the emperor.
right?
The emperor
Right?
who's going to kill him within years of writing that. Like, it's, to me, I remember whenever President Obama, people were so mad at him, and I said we should pray for him. I couldn't pray for him. I'm like, then you need to repent, because if you cannot pray for a political leader who you don't like, the
Yeah.
emperor was like literally getting ready to kill people, Christians. I mean, it's all right. We can. The Roman peace was, they brought Roman peace to the world because they would kill everybody who rose up, and they call it, we brought peace.
Yeah. It's the healing temples where only the well were allowed in.
Yeah.
And, it's,
Well, what did you think about the use of Brueggemann? Because the question is, how do seers today, how do we in prophetic people today, how do you influence? What is your job when you do find yourself advising the president or the CEO or the mayor or the city council? Like, what vision do you cast, and how do you get people to pursue it?
yeah. And I think that's where we need We need that prophetic voice that Brigham is so often talking about, that is seen, again, that society where Moses is, he's dreaming of it in Egypt. Where can we have a just society where there's compassion, there's equality, there's mercy, that all these things can happen. And that takes somebody who's been inspired by God to see something that, whether it's physical eyes as a seer, or it's that prophetic insight. And I think Brueggemann really enlarges it to the point where we've got this prophetic imagination,
Mm-hmm.
because we can all tap into that imagination. And I think that's the reason why, the Bible starts us out with the Garden of Eden, because that's supposed to be the image that follows us through the rest of the reading. And that's the image that should follow us as we live. Can you imagine Eden? Can you imagine that place where you're talking to God? And, I think about my friends who are either seers or they're prophetically gifted. A large percentage of them tell me that as children, they would sit around and imagine what it was to talk to God.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like in their heart to be able to have that experience. And then at some point it crossed over. God actually started fulfilling that, because that was where their imagination took them. They could see it, and that image became the prayer.
Hmm.
And so the
The
seer,
image
the
becomes the
prophet.
prayer. Yeah, you see the end in mind. You see you see the end. You have a
Mm-hmm.
vision of what it should be, and that becomes the prayer. And then you kind of
Yeah.
start challenging the status quo, if you will, or challenging. This model applies to all sorts of situations, not just like
Oh, yeah.
seers and power. I mean, but like I know like a youth group that went in 3 years from 90 kids to 13 kids. Like, okay, so you need to like, what do you do now? How do you challenge? What's the end in mind, and then what systems need to be disruptive to bring them back?
Well, and that's the thing, because most of the time our systems, we don't even realize they're systems. We think
Right.
they're like natural law, that this is just the way it's supposed to be. We've got Stockholm syndrome to our culture.
We do have Stockholm
And
syndrome.
it's sad, but it's like, oh, this is just the way you do things. I know we've all heard that growing up, but we don't even realize how far that goes. And sometimes it's for good reason. But the prophet is always there to challenge the status quo. And the seer gets to do that because they're saying, hey, here's what I see going on in the spiritual background.
Mm-hmm.
It's been on my mind lately because of the sermon series that we're going through at church. So often what the Bible will do is we'll get a story and then we'll get a psalm about it. And that psalm is the spiritual commentary on what's happening behind the physical veil.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can see this with Exodus 14. We can see it with Exodus 15. It's the same story. One's the physical events, one's the spiritual events. Judges 4 and 5, Deborah with the battle there with Sisera,
And then her
same
song.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she's like talking about the angels. It says the stars fought from their courses. That's the angels. She's telling you the angels fought there. So that's what the seers get to do. They get to say, all you're seeing is the physical way this is playing out, and you're thinking that's miraculous. And I'm telling you there's even more.
Yeah, I mean, just for some context, for someone who didn't get what you're saying with the Exodus, when he parted the sea, and then they went through, and then the army came through, and then the sea came and drowned Pharaoh and his soldiers. Then they sing a song,
Mm-hmm.
and what they sing, like they're saying, this is just what happened, but what they describe in the song is not what they just saw. So what
Right.
they describe was happening in the spiritual realm, and same
Yeah.
with Deborah, same with Deborah's, which by the way, those two songs are like some of the oldest texts
Exactly.
in Scripture.
Exactly.
I kind of wonder, yeah, and I had the same thing. I put Psalm 82 in the chapter, which is famous among us who like to talk about the divine counsel. But you have to
Yes.
remember, that's looking at what's going on behind
Mm-hmm.
the helpless and the poor and the affliction, the people being afflicted and the injustice. I mean, people are seeing the injustice. The seer sees the spirits behind it. But the point is, like, we still see the injustice, and we're called to imagine a world without injustice and then make that happen.
Yeah.
And maybe it's government, maybe it's, maybe it's your corporate environment. I mean, there's all sorts of ways, whatever context you're in. It could be churches who see hunger. It could be churches who see, too many kids being born out of wedlock, and so they're like really promoting marriage. Or like they're promoting, I mean, I don't know what it is. It's like, I'm not your prophet. Like, your churches have prophets and seers who need to step up and say, hey, this is an injustice. This is cruelty going on here. We as a body can address it in this creative way. And that is, and then, energize the body or the company or the nation or whatever, the city, to redress the wrongs.
Yes.
Not redress the wrongs, but to bring about God's vision for that area. Because we have our vision and then we have God's vision. We want God's vision for the area.
Well, and that's just it. And so often we try to come up with a new system to replace the broken system. And
we hire a think tank, and we hire...
We need an inspired thought. We don't need a new system. And so many people don't realize that when I say inspired, I'm using it very literally. Inspired means to breathe in the breath of God. That's literally what our idea, our concept of inspiration, that's what it's built on, is that Genesis 2 account that has been carried forward. And that's what the prophet does. He breathes in the breath of God. Something new comes to life within him. And now he can begin to cast that vision out for other people to participate in. And there is such a fear of prophets who don't want to play with the system that they get shut out.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the reason why, even in the Old Testament, what's the prophet do? He shows up at court, he delivers a word, he leaves.
Mm-hmm. He
has to leave, because if he stayed, somebody's going to kill him. That's just the way it was. And
or maybe he'll change and be like the prophets that Jeremiah was irritated about, where they just like, maintain my station, maintain my wealth. I'll just tell you what I think.
There's an interesting counterpoint to Joseph in Egypt.
Yeah.
If you compare the court prophets that Hananiah, that Jeremiah was coming against, and Jeremiah, accuses him, you keep saying peace, peace, but there is no peace. Mm-hmm. And so does being part of the system corrupt you to the point you can't speak against the system? You have to be that outsider and maintain that outside status in order to be able to speak truth back into a system that you're not a part of.
Ugh, that is such a hard climb.
There's a reason John the Baptist was in the wilderness.
Yeah.
There's a reason why.
That's wow.
That'll mess with your brain for a while.
There's something to it. I mean, maybe Rasputin was. I don't know. I know. About him, but then once he gets surrounded by beautiful women and tons of money, and I mean, he grew up in probably a hovel, and was a prophet there, and then now you're going to get corrupted by it.
But okay, so I know.
I mean, if the advisor to the president could go in and just challenge and piss him off so much that he fires her, can she? Will she? Can she? I don't know. I'm just talking. I'm just like, how comfortable do we get in our wealth? What did we talk about a few weeks ago? That wealth breeds apathy?
Yeah. I think I vaguely remember something about that.
Yeah. That's why you have to take a Sabbath to remember where you came from. The whole wealth breeds apathy. When they went into the promised land, God knew they were going to get wealthy, and then they would forget where they came from. That's why you take a Sabbath to remember.
Mm-hmm. You go back and live in that hut, that little sukkot, so you can, And I think one of the things that we have to remember too is that one of the hallmarks of a true prophet, according to the rabbis during Jesus' day, was, do you like what they're saying? Because if you don't like what they're saying, they're probably from God. If you
Yeah.
do like what they're saying, probably false. And the other thought I have is, how many people do we know? We've watched them grow up. They were a child singer, a child star, and they came from like a really devout Christian family. They were making all the right moves, saying all the right things. They seemed to be walking out the faith in front of the world, and then the next thing you know, they're in their underwear on the stage doing something heinous.
Yeah.
Um, you know, artists and prophets share the same space in ancient Israel culture, because they both create inspired, works. That's the word I'm looking for.
We're actually going to talk about that next time. Seers
So
and worship leaders.
yeah, it's huge. And so, but I think my thing was, I think there is a giant target on prophets and the creative people who have that prophetic leaning or gifting to corrupt it.
Yeah.
Because, if God can get the prophets to just, yeah, not God, sorry. Oh, totally misspoke. If the enemy can get the prophets to just come over to his side, twist it just a little bit. I mean, we go back to Numbers 22 with Balaam. Curse
Mm-hmm.
Israel. Curse
Mm-hmm.
Israel. I'll pay you. I'll pay you. And we're watching a bunch of prophets, I think, in our day. I think it's been happening for probably
Mm-hmm.
since the beginning of time, going, yes, please, I'll take the money.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
It's interesting.
anyhow.
Like you think of Nathan. I'm thinking about these prophets who came in, delivered, and got out
Mhm.
before he could be corrupted. There's something to
Well,
that. I mean, I like living in comfort.
yeah. Well, I mean, you can compare and contrast Elijah and Elisha. I mean, Elijah, he's the prophet wilderness. He's out there in the caves. He's being fed by ravens. Elisha spends more time in the royal courts than just about anyone. And what's he remembered for? His temper.
Yeah.
I mean, he raises two people from the dead, and we remember about the fact that he had kids killed, quote unquote kids killed, for calling him bald.
Mm-hmm.
And so the temper ruined everything because he couldn't keep it together.
Maybe
So,
because of his connection to the wealth. Wow, there's a
like,
lot of food here. I just want to. I don't have. I just want to sit around and think about what we just said.
well, none of this is planned. That's the fun part, because
Yeah. Like,
it's,
where's the campfire? I feel like we're sitting around a campfire. Like,
yeah, yeah. That's the way it should be. People should be having these kind of conversations, at least on a weekly basis.
mm-hmm.
And if you don't have friends that you can have these kind of conversations with, get in a church, find some kind of group in your area, make it a point, because you will starve to death,
Yeah.
and you will go crazy. So, and I guarantee you, there's people out there who want to have these conversations, and most of them are just waiting for someone to invite them.
Mm-hmm.
Be the person who sends the invitation. So,
Thank you for listening to the Seer See Podcast. Opening and closing music is Sun by Jason Callahan. Bumper music includes Just Around the World and Alta Heron by Keela Camps. Music and Seer See Podcast are distributed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0.